Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Okay, so yesterday I checked out Intel's new Core i9-10900K for the first time and found while performance overall was strong, it didn't really fit in that well against the current AMD Ryzen lineup. At $500-ish, it's a lot more expensive than the Ryzen 9 3900X. It is slower in most applications, while the advantage in games is so small, it won't be perceived for the most part. In the end, I wasn't really sure who the 10900K was for. The more affordable Core i7-10700K though, now that looks to be a more interesting part. Basically, what we have here is a Core i9-9900K at a 25% discount, as Intel has set the MSRP at $374 US, though that's the tray price for 1,000 units, so it will cost a bit more than that at retail, and it has gone up for pre-order at $410, and of course it's already out of stock. Still, with the 9900K currently retailing at about $530 US, that is a reasonable discount, but I do wonder, will it be enough? Today's video sponsor is Corsair and their Dark Core RGB Pro wireless gaming mouse. I've been using this mouse for weeks now and I found the contoured shape extremely comfortable, and I also really like the feel of the rubberized palm rest. As for performance, it packs a custom 18,000 dpi optical sensor with what Corsair calls hyperpolling technology, and that allows the mouse to communicate with your PC at up to 2000 Hz. Enjoy up to 50 hours of runtime between charges, and of course you can charge the internal lithium battery on the go with the included USB Type-C cable. You can also customize the look of the mouse with 9-zone dynamic RGB lighting, and you can control the lighting, button assignments and more with the iQ software. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Before we jump into the benchmarks, let's just quickly discuss the Core i7-10700K specs. Like the 9900K, this is an 8-core, 16-thread CPU, but whereas the Coffee Lake part features a base clock of 3.6 GHz, the 10700K won't dip below 3.8 GHz, and as a result, the TDP has been increased to 125 watts. The boost clock frequency has also been increased by 100 MHz, which sees the 10700K hit 5.1 GHz, but the L3 cache goes unchanged with both models sporting a 16 MB capacity. So that's the 10700K in a nutshell. Time to get into the benchmarks. Once again, the Ryzen processors were tested on the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Master, while the 8th and 9th gen Intel Core processors were tested on the Gigabyte Z390 Aorus Ultra, and then the new 10th gen Intel Core processors on the Asus ROG Maximus 12 Extreme. For this video, we're going to look exclusively at results for the Intel CPUs that aren't power limited, so no TDP limited testing here. This is typically how we test Intel CPUs, such as the 9900K for example, and this is how the majority of Z490 motherboards operate out of the box. At least that's what we believe at this point in time. So while we will be using the default clock multiplier tables, none of the Intel CPUs adhering to any power limits. What this means for the 10700K is that under full load, the all-core clock speed will be 4.7 GHz, and it will hold that frequency for the duration of all tests. And this is the same all-core clock frequency that the 9900K operates at. Finally, all configurations were tested with a GeForce RTX 2080 Ti, 32 GB of DDR4 3200CL14 memory, and a Corsair Hydro Series H150i Pro 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler. Okay, let's get into the results. As usual, we'll start with the Cinebench R20 multi-core results, and here we see that the 10700K is indeed able to match the 9900K with a score of 4,985 points. Although we're looking at a mere 2% increase in performance, that's within the margin of error, even for our 3-run average. Now, when looking at the single-core performance, we see that while the 10700K is very strong, it's not exceptional here, basically matching the 9900K, the 3700X, and the 3900X. Moving on to 7-zip compression performance, here we set the 10700K as just 1.5% faster than the 3700X, and that meant it was 37% slower than the 3900X. So again, quite a large performance deficit to AMD at the same price point. And things get even worse for Intel in the decompression test, as here the 10700K is actually 9% slower than the 3700X, and that places it well behind the 3900X, losing by a 39% margin. The AES 256-bit encryption performance is interesting because here we see that the 10700K is actually a little bit slower than the 9900K, trailing by a 6% margin. Given these two CPUs are identical in terms of specs, but the 10700K clock's a little bit higher, that shouldn't be possible. But the Comet Lake architecture does introduce a number of hardware-level security fixes, and we've seen previously with Cascade Lake X that this does at times reduce performance, so I believe that's what we're looking at here. Interestingly, the 10700K was also slower than the 9900K in Blender's Open Data benchmark, though we're talking just a few seconds here, so performance was basically identical. The V-Ray performance is very typical of what we've seen so far. Here the 10700K is just 4% faster than the 9900K, and that meant it was almost 30% slower than the Ryzen 9 3900X. The 10700K performed as expected in Corona, edging out the 9900K by a slim margin. It was also 14% faster than the 3700X, but still 24% slower than the 3900X. So, like I said, an expected result, but in the grand scheme of things, not a particularly good result for Intel. Code compilation performance sees the 10700K just edge ahead of the 9900K, making it slightly slower than the 3700X and a whopping 33% slower than the 3900X. So again, performance is as expected, but when it comes to serious productivity work, Intel does appear to be outgunned by the competing Ryzen processors. Moving on to DaVinci Resolve Studio performance, and here we see that the 10700K is 6% faster than the 9900K, allowing it to match the 3700X. That still saw it come in 9% slower than the 3900X, but that's not a huge difference despite not being a great result overall. The performance margins seen in Premiere Pro are very similar to that of DaVinci Resolve. Again, the 10700K is able to match the 3700X, and that meant it was 6% faster than the 9900K. Unfortunately though, that also meant it was 17% slower than the 3900X, so not a great result in terms of price versus performance. Intel's higher clock CPUs do perform well in Photoshop, and while the 10700K doesn't exactly destroy the 3900X, at least it's able to match it here, and that's not something we've seen much of. Performance in Adobe After Effects is quite average, it has to be said, despite the 10700K offering a 6% performance uplift over the 9900K. That meant it was still slower than the 3700X and 10% slower than the 3900X, so again, somewhat of a disappointing result. Moving on to power consumption, and here we have the total system consumption numbers. The 10700K matched the 3900X at 230 watts, and that meant in terms of performance per watt, Intel is at a significant disadvantage. But that's certainly not news to anyone at this point. Well, maybe just the human memes over at User Benchmark. Anyway, the 3900X was 60% faster than the 10700K in Blender, so that's a significant advantage in terms of performance per watt, and I guess just outright performance. Okay, so let's take a look at gaming performance, starting with Battlefield 5 1080p with the Ultra Quality preset, and of course we're using a GeForce RTX 2080 Ti graphics card. Here the 10700K matched the 9900K and 10900K to deliver the best, most consistent gaming experience of all the CPUs tested. The 1% low performance was 19% better than what we see with the 3rd gen Ryzen processors, though we're only looking at around a 6% improvement in average frame rate. Still, this is a strong gaming result for Intel, and it's great to see 9900K light performance at a more affordable price. That said, if you play at 1440p, and I do like to think this is the minimum resolution people rocking an RTX 2080 Ti would target, then the difference between the 10700K and the 3900X, for example, is basically indistinguishable. Next up we have Far Cry New Dawn, and again we're looking at 9900K and even 10900K light performance with the 10700K. So that's good news, but also not that unexpected. The Far Cry results have always favoured Intel CPUs, and we like to include this as sort of a worst case scenario for AMD. So while the 10700K will often be around 5% faster than the 3900X, there are titles such as Far Cry New Dawn where the Intel CPU is around 15% faster, and we even see that margin when testing at 1440p. The frame rates in Gears Tactics also see the 10700K match the 9900K and 10900K, pumping out 138 FPS on average to make it 8% faster than the 3900X at 1080p. The margin is slightly reduced to 6% at 1440p, though the 1% low result is now identical, which means the gaming experience using either CPU will be very much the same. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege is a title where the 10900K was able to distance itself from the 9900K, albeit by a small margin. This advantage was made possible by the small increase in clock speed, and we see that advantage is also shared by the 10700K, though we are only talking about a 5% increase in 1% low performance. And of course, that advantage completely disappears at 1440p. Here the 10700K is just a few frames faster than the 3900X, and again, that'll see both processors deliver the same gaming experience. Ghost Recon Breakpoint also sees the 10700K match the 10900K, and by extension, the 9900K, 9700K, and even the 8700K. Again, the 10700K was faster than the 3900X, but this time we're talking about just a 5% performance advantage at 1080p. The margins do remain much the same at 1440p, though here the 10700K was 7% faster than 3900X, but still, overall, we're looking at a very similar gaming experience. The second last game tested is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and here the 10700K was just a few frames off the pace of the 10900K, and only about 6% faster than the 3900X. Moving to 1440p, and we find the 10700K is now faster than the 3900X and 3950X, while it's able to again match the 10900K, but I think it's fair to say all deliver virtually identical performance. Now for the last game tested, Red Dead Redemption 2, and here we find a rather strong GPU bottleneck even at 1080p, despite using dialed down quality settings. The 10700K averaged 103 FPS, which saw it match the 10900K, along with the 9900K, 9700K, and 8700K. It was also just a few frames faster than the Ryzen 9 and Ryzen 7 processors. The margins were reduced further at 1440p, and now we see basically no difference in performance between the majority of the CPUs tested. Looking at the average performance across the 7 games tested at 1080p, we see that the 10700K is basically identical to the 10900K in terms of gaming performance, and just a whisker faster than the 9900K, and even the 9700K for that matter, though the 1% low performance was improved by 8%. When compared to the 3900X, you're looking at a 7% improvement for the average frame rate and an 8% improvement for the 1% low performance. Jumping to 1440p reduces the average frame rate and 1% low margin to just 5%. So again, while the 10700K is clearly the faster gaming processor, it's really not that much faster, and in most instances, you won't actually notice the difference. Okay, so here we are at the end of another 10th Gen Core Series review, and it's now time to make sense of the data. I really think this is a similar case to what we saw with the Core i9 10900K. The 10700K, it simply struggles to match the value of the competing Ryzen parts, and although it does provide slightly higher frame rates in games, we're generally only talking about single-digit gains, while the deficit in productivity applications is often far more significant. The way I'm looking at this, the 10700K is either on par with the 3700X for a massive 40% price premium, or much slower than the 3900X for the same price. Man, either option sees Intel come out well behind, and I just don't think the often slightly better gaming performance can get them out of that one. That said, the 10700K certainly makes more sense than the 10900K, as it offers the same level of gaming performance for around $100 US saving. That being the case, I feel that the Intel Core i5 10600K, which I will be reviewing shortly, is probably going to end up being one of Intel's most compelling 10th gen products, especially for gamers. The 10600K is basically an overclocked 8700K, and given the 8700K offers a very similar gaming experience to that of the 10700K, and by extension the 10900K, at what should end up being a $280 US asking price, this will almost certainly be the CPU to get if you're gaming exclusively. The 10700K and 10900K really do suffer from the fact that games don't really require more than a 6-core 12-thread processor in 2020, and I seriously doubt that's going to change anytime soon. That being the case, spending $100 to $200 more on those Core i7 and Core i9 parts won't make sense for most gamers, and this is what lands those more expensive CPUs in a bit of a tough spot. So while the Core i7 10700K is certainly a good deal compared to the outgoing Core i9 19900K, the Core i5 10600K should offer the same gaming experience, or at least a very similar gaming experience, at a much cheaper price point. And of course, if you're after the most bang for your buck at the $400 price point, then there's simply no going past the Ryzen 9 3900X. Look, had Intel been able to offer the 10700K at a more reasonable price, $300 US, let's say, then it's certainly something I could have recommended as a Ryzen 7 3700X alternative. But at $400 or more, it's a pass for me, just too expensive and not worth the premium. Basically what I found with the 10900K. And again, availability looks to be the key issue here. And while I was able to purchase a Core i7 10700K chip on release day, getting my hands on this guy here, or at least this is the box, the chip's still in the test system. But yeah, I was told I was very lucky to get my hands on that one. Extremely limited supply, so yeah, getting yourself one might prove extremely difficult. And that is going to do it for my first look at the 10700K. Let me know what you guys think about this new part from Intel, and if you liked this review, well, you know what to do. There's the like button. Also subscribe if you haven't done that already, because we will have more 10th gen content coming up. Keen to check out the Core i5 part, the 10600K, that looks pretty good actually, and then the Core i3 models, they also look to offer some pretty good value, so we'll be checking them out whenever I can buy them. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.